My childhood friend stole my inheritance and I never saw it coming. Imagine this. You've trusted your best friend since childhood with everything. Your secrets, your dreams, even your family's inheritance. But one day, you wake up to find out that the person you've trusted for years has vanished, taking your entire inheritance with them. All those promises of loyalty and friendship? Gone. Now, you're left with nothing but a broken heart, a bank account in ruins, and a sense of betrayal so deep, you don't know where to turn. This is the story of OP, a woman who placed her trust in her childhood best friend, only to have that trust shattered when her friend ran off with her inheritance, leaving her in financial ruin. It's a story of deception, lost trust, and the heartbreaking reality of betrayal by someone you loved like family. By the end of this story, you'll be asking yourself, how could someone betray the person who trusted them most? Could you ever forgive a friend who stole your future from you? Let's dive into this devastating tale of friendship gone horribly wrong. OP and her best friend, let's call her Sarah, had known each other since they were little kids. They met when they were just 5 years old, living in the same neighborhood, and from that moment on, they were inseparable. They went to the same school, shared the same hobbies, and told each other everything. To OP, Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was more like a sister. They grew up together, weathering the storms of adolescence, navigating high school, and standing by each other's side through heartbreaks, achievements, and everything in between. Their bond was unbreakable, or so OP thought. As they grew older, their lives took different paths, but they always stayed close, checking in on each other and celebrating each other's successes. As the years went by, OP's parents became like second parents to Sarah. They welcomed her into their home, included her in family vacations, and always treated her like one of their own. OP's parents were hard-working people, and over the years, they built a comfortable life for themselves. They wanted to make sure OP would be financially secure in the future, so they set aside an inheritance for her, a nest egg that she would one day receive. When OP's parents passed away, the inheritance became even more important. It was the last gift they had left for OP, a way to secure her future and honor their memory. But managing the inheritance was overwhelming for OP, who was still grieving the loss of her parents. That's when Sarah stepped in. Sarah had always been good with money. She had studied finance in college and had a knack for managing investments. OP, on the other hand, didn't know much about finances and wasn't sure how to handle the inheritance. So, when Sarah offered to help manage it for her, OP didn't hesitate. She trusted Sarah with her life. Why wouldn't she trust her with her inheritance? It seemed like the perfect solution. Sarah promised to invest the money wisely, to help OP grow her savings, and to make sure she was financially secure for years to come. OP handed over control of her inheritance, confident that Sarah would do right by her, just like she always had. At first, everything seemed fine. Sarah would send OP updates on the investments, telling her how well everything was going. The money was supposedly growing, and OP felt relieved. She didn't need to worry about it. Sarah had it under control. But then things started to change. Sarah became more distant. She stopped giving OP regular updates, brushing off OP's questions with vague answers. "Don't worry about it," Sarah would say. "Everything's fine. Trust me." OP, wanting to believe her friend, tried not to push too hard. But a part of her couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. As time went on, Sarah became harder to reach. She stopped answering OP's calls and texts as quickly as she used to. When they did talk, Sarah seemed distracted, always in a rush, always promising to call back later, but never following through. OP felt like their friendship was slipping away, and she didn't understand why. But despite Sarah's growing distance, OP didn't want to believe that anything was wrong. After all, this was Sarah, her best friend, her sister in everything but blood. She had been by OP's side for as long as she could remember. Why would she ever do anything to hurt her? OP tried to convince herself that she was overthinking it, that Sarah was just busy, that everything would be okay. But then came the financial red flags. OP started receiving letters from the bank about her accounts. Some of the investments Sarah had made were losing money, and there were strange withdrawals from accounts that OP didn't remember authorizing. When she brought it up to Sarah, her friend would always have an excuse. A mistake at the bank, a temporary market downturn, a strategy that wasn't working yet but would soon. OP's unease grew, but Sarah was so convincing. She had always been the smart one when it came to money, and OP didn't feel like she had enough knowledge to challenge her. But the nagging feeling that something was wrong only intensified. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe the worst? OP was in love with her best friend, with the bond they had built over the years. But the red flags were becoming harder and harder to ignore. What would you do if you started seeing signs that the person you trusted most might be hiding something from you? One day, OP received a call from her financial advisor, someone she had been working with independently of Sarah. He sounded concerned and told her that he needed to meet with her immediately. OP's heart raced. She had been trying not to think about the strange bank statements and Sarah's increasingly erratic behavior, but now it seemed like everything was coming to a head. When OP arrived at the meeting, the advisor laid everything out in front of her. Sarah had been withdrawing money from OP's accounts, large sums of money that OP hadn't authorized. The investments Sarah had claimed were doing well. They were practically worthless. The money OP had entrusted to Sarah was almost completely gone. OP felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. She sat there, staring at the numbers, unable to believe what she was seeing. How could this have happened? How could her best friend, her lifelong friend, have done this to her? Overwhelmed with shock and betrayal, OP immediately tried to contact Sarah. But for the first time in their friendship, Sarah didn't answer. OP called her over and over, leaving messages, texts, anything she could do to reach her. But there was no response. It was as if Sarah had disappeared. Frantic, OP went to Sarah's apartment, hoping to confront her in person. But when she got there, she found the place completely empty. Sarah was gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. OP's heart shattered. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. Sarah had run off with her inheritance. The woman she had trusted with her future, the woman she had loved like a sister, had stolen everything from her and vanished without a trace. OP collapsed into tears, unable to process the depth of the betrayal. This wasn't just about the money. This was about years of friendship, trust, and loyalty that had been shattered in an instant. Sarah had been there for every major moment in OP's life. Her childhood, her teenage years, the loss of her parents. And now she had taken everything from OP, leaving her with nothing. OP's mind raced with questions. Had Sarah been planning this all along? How long had she been lying? Was any part of their friendship real? Or had it all been a facade? The sense of loss was overwhelming. OP hadn't just lost her inheritance, she had lost her best friend. Can you imagine the pain of discovering that your best friend, the person you trusted most, had betrayed you so completely? How would you cope with realizing that the person you loved like family had stolen everything from you and disappeared? OP's world was crumbling, and the sense of betrayal was unbearable. In the days and weeks following Sarah's disappearance, OP was a wreck. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything other than the betrayal. Every memory of their friendship, their childhood, their shared experiences, their promises of loyalty, was now tainted by Sarah's lies. OP felt like she was living in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The financial devastation was overwhelming. OP had no idea how she was going to recover. The inheritance her parents had left for her was supposed to secure her future, and now it was gone. She was left with almost nothing, and the thought of starting over from scratch was terrifying. But beyond the financial loss, the emotional toll was even harder to bear. OP had always prided herself on her ability to trust people, on the deep connections she built with those she loved. Now, she felt like she couldn't trust anyone, not even herself. How had she missed the signs? How had she been so blind to Sarah's deceit? OP's self-esteem was shattered. She felt foolish, naive, and utterly betrayed. The person she had relied on for so many years had turned out to be a stranger, someone capable of hurting her in ways she never imagined. The pain of losing Sarah, the friend she had considered family, was almost too much to bear. On top of the emotional devastation, OP now had to deal with the legal fallout. She contacted a lawyer to explore her options, but it quickly became clear that getting the money back would be incredibly difficult. Sarah had been careful. She had forged documents, covered her tracks, and disappeared without leaving much of a trail. The chances of finding her, let alone recovering the stolen inheritance, were slim. OP felt hopeless. Not only had she lost her best friend and her inheritance, but now she was facing the daunting reality that she might never get justice. The legal system was slow and complicated, and every step of the way felt like hitting a brick wall. Have you ever felt so betrayed by someone you loved that you didn't know how to move forward? OP wasn't just dealing with the loss of money. She was dealing with the loss of trust, of friendship, of everything she had believed in. How would you begin to pick up the pieces after a betrayal so deep? Despite the overwhelming pain, OP couldn't stop herself from searching for answers. She needed to know why Sarah had done this, how someone she had trusted for so long could betray her so deeply. OP began reaching out to mutual friends, trying to piece together what had happened in the weeks leading up to Sarah's disappearance. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. It turned out that Sarah had been struggling financially for years, something she had never told OP. She had made bad investments, taken out loans she couldn't repay, and was drowning in debt. At some point, Sarah must have decided that OP's inheritance was her way out. It was a selfish, calculated decision, one that destroyed their friendship and OP's financial future. Learning about Sarah's financial troubles only deepened the betrayal for OP. Why hadn't Sarah come to her for help? Why hadn't she trusted OP enough to be honest with her? Instead, Sarah had chosen to steal from her, to lie to her, and to destroy everything they had built together. The betrayal cut even deeper now. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about loyalty, about the years of friendship that Sarah had thrown away for her own gain. OP was left feeling utterly alone, abandoned by the person she had loved most. As OP grappled with the reality of what had happened, she found herself torn between anger, grief, and guilt. She was furious at Sarah for what she had done, but she also felt guilty for not seeing the signs sooner, for not being more cautious with her inheritance. OP's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, and she didn't know how to make sense of any of it. The worst part was the loneliness. OP had lost her best friend, the person she had shared everything with for years. Now there was a gaping hole in her life, one that she didn't know how to fill. The pain of losing Sarah, someone she had trusted with her whole heart, was almost unbearable. Have you ever found yourself searching for answers after a betrayal, trying to make sense of how someone you loved could hurt you so deeply? OP was desperate to understand why Sarah had done what she did, but the answers only seemed to deepen the pain. How would you cope with the loss of a friend you had trusted your entire life? As the months went on, OP realized that she couldn't keep living in the shadow of Sarah's betrayal. She had lost so much: her inheritance, her best friend, her sense of security. But she refused to let it destroy her completely. OP knew that if she wanted to move forward, she had to start rebuilding her life, piece by piece. The first step was accepting that the money was gone. OP's lawyer had told her that the chances of recovering the inheritance were slim, and while that reality was painful, it was something she had to face. OP began focusing on her career, finding ways to rebuild her savings and create a new financial future for herself. But the hardest part of moving forward wasn't the financial recovery. It was learning to trust again. OP had always been someone who believed in the goodness of people, who trusted her friends deeply. Sarah's betrayal had shattered that part of her, and OP wasn't sure if she could ever trust anyone in the same way again. But slowly, OP began to heal. She leaned on the friends who had stood by her side, the ones who hadn't abandoned her when things got tough. She started seeing a therapist to work through the emotional scars left by Sarah's betrayal, and little by little, OP began to feel like herself again. As time went on, OP found strength in the lessons she had learned. She had been through the worst kind of betrayal, but she had survived. She had lost everything, but she was still standing. OP realized that while Sarah had taken her inheritance, she hadn't taken her resilience, her determination, or her ability to move forward. OP's life wasn't perfect, and the pain of Sarah's betrayal still lingered, but she had found a new sense of peace. She had built a life for herself on her own terms, and she knew that she was stronger because of what she had been through. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal so deep that it shook you to your core? OP had lost so much, but she refused to let the betrayal define her. What would you do to take back control of your life after someone tried to destroy it? In the end, OP never got the closure she had hoped for. Sarah was never found, and the inheritance was never recovered. But OP realized that justice didn't always come in the form of revenge or financial recovery. It came in the form of healing, of rebuilding her life, of reclaiming her future. OP had been through hell, but she had come out the other side stronger. She had learned hard lessons about trust, about loyalty, and about the strength it took to survive the worst kind of betrayal. And while the scars of what Sarah had done would always remain, OP knew that she had the power to move forward. So what do you think? Was justice ever truly served for OP? Could you ever forgive a friend who betrayed you so deeply? Or would the pain be too much to overcome? Let me know in the comments below. How could Sarah do that after so many years? I can't believe Sarah would betray someone she's been friends with since childhood. They shared everything, and OP even trusted her with something as important as her inheritance. I don't understand how someone can be that heartless after so much history together. It's beyond cruel. I know, right? Betrayal from someone you consider family hurts more than anything. It's one thing to lose money, but the loss of trust in someone who's been by your side your whole life, that's devastating. It makes you question if Sarah ever truly cared about OP, or if she was always in it for selfish reasons. It's hard to imagine how she could turn her back on a lifetime of friendship for money. Some people's greed really knows no bounds. Those red flags were screaming. The red flags were there, but OP trusted Sarah too much to see them clearly. Sarah becoming distant, avoiding updates, and being protective of the accounts, those were all signs that something wasn't right. It's so sad how trust can blind you to what's really happening. It's easy to see the red flags in hindsight. But when you've trusted someone your whole life, you don't expect them to betray you. OP probably convinced herself that everything was fine because she couldn't imagine Sarah hurting her like that. Yeah, it's a classic case of denial. When you trust someone that deeply, you don't want to believe they could be capable of something so awful. OP's intuition was right, but her love for Sarah clouded her judgment. The emotional toll is worse than the financial loss. Losing her inheritance was bad enough, but the emotional toll of losing her best friend like that? That's a wound that won't heal easily. Sarah didn't just steal money. She stole OP's ability to trust and left her emotionally wrecked. Exactly. Money can be earned back, but rebuilding trust after a betrayal like that is so much harder. It's not just about the inheritance. It's about losing someone you thought would always have your back. That's a different kind of pain. What really hits hard is how OP probably feels like she lost her past too. All those childhood memories are now tainted by this betrayal. How do you even begin to cope with that? Sarah's disappearance makes it worse. The fact that Sarah just disappeared without a trace makes it all so much worse. Not only did she steal the inheritance, but she didn't even have the guts to face OP. It's like she knew exactly what she was doing and didn't care enough to stick around for the fallout. I think Sarah planned the whole thing. She must have known she couldn't get away with it forever. So she took off as soon as OP started catching on. It's sickening how calculated it all was. Absolutely! Disappearing like that shows how little Sarah valued their friendship. She was willing to cut ties and leave OP in ruins without even a goodbye. That's not just betrayal, that's sociopathic. It's heartbreaking how OP blames herself. It's so heartbreaking that OP blamed herself, thinking she should have seen the signs earlier. But the truth is, when you trust someone like a sister, you're not looking for betrayal. It's not her fault Sarah took advantage of that trust. Yeah, it's so unfair that OP felt guilty. Sarah was manipulative and deceitful. It's not OP's fault that she trusted someone who she thought was family. The betrayal says everything about Sarah's character, not OP's. It's really sad how victims of betrayal often turn the blame inward. OP was doing what any of us would do, trusting someone she loved. The fact that she feels guilty just adds another layer to the pain Sarah caused. The search for answers must have been brutal. OP trying to piece together what happened and why Sarah did it. That must have been agonizing. Discovering that Sarah was struggling financially and decided to steal from her is heartbreaking. Instead of asking for help, Sarah chose the most destructive path possible. It really shows Sarah's lack of character. She could have turned to OP for help, but instead, she chose betrayal. It's such a selfish and cowardly way out of her financial mess. Agreed. OP was probably searching for something to make sense of it all. But learning that Sarah had been hiding her financial troubles only deepened the pain. It's such a tragic way to find out who your real friends are. Rebuilding after this kind of betrayal takes incredible strength. OP's decision to move on and rebuild her life after such a deep betrayal is incredibly inspiring. It shows how resilient she is. She may have lost her inheritance and her best friend, but she didn't lose her strength. That's something no one can take away from her. 100%. OP didn't let this destroy her, and that's what's most powerful about her story. It's a reminder that even when everything falls apart, we can still rebuild and come out stronger. It's amazing how she took something so painful and used it as fuel to move forward. She didn't let the betrayal define her, and that's such an important lesson for anyone going through something similar. And if you found this story as intense and emotional as I did, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.